Well, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar on Seeing the World with Wonder, Making Meaning Through Image, Story, and the Labyrinth with Lauren and Catherine Anderson. Lauren, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks so much for setting this up, and welcome everyone. And we appreciate you coming to this webinar to hear about the next and very important event, the delight to present through Veriditas. And as Anne mentioned, seeing the world with wonder and seeing through the eyes of wonder. So I'm delighted to step in here. Many of you know me. I'm author of Walking a Sacred Path and have been working with the Labyrinth for years. And I'm delighted that we're returning back to Ghost Ranch, and this time with Catherine Anderson, which I'm really a delight to know and to work with. So it's really a wonderful way of kind of opening up, really, Catherine, between you and me, new work. Mm-hmm. So Catherine is many things. She came to the attention, actually the Labyrinth called her to Chartres Cathedral earlier on, but she trained as a Veriditas facilitator in 2009. She's also very well known as a soul collage facilitator and as one of the major trainers. She lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, and is also author of the book called The Creative Photographer. And so you'll be hearing about some of her gifts and talents as well as we talk about what we're presenting in Ghost Ranch. So Catherine, it's a delight to have you here.
I'm excited to be doing this and to be bringing the photography as another way of expanding one's senses and walking the labyrinth with that expanded view of the world, having seen through eyes of wonder.
For sure. And it really does all tie together. And I hope you who are here in the webinar will have a sense of that by the end of this really kind of just half-hour presentation. I do want to note that we do have the ability to have questions and answers. And you would find that at the bottom of your screen under chat or Q&A. And Anne will be watching those questions, and hopefully we'll have time toward the end to make sure. And Anne, please let us know if there's questions that you want to direct our attention to.
Will do.
Thank you. Catherine has made this wonderful, just very short 5-minute overview. And if you haven't been to Ghost Ranch, this will be your first and wonderful introduction to it. So let's start with that, because it's a wonderful way of opening this whole topic.
There is more of a connection between the creating of a photograph and the labyrinth than meets the eye. Ghost Ranch, New Mexico, originally home to artist Georgia O'Keeffe, will be the setting of the Veriditas pilgrimage, Seeing the World with Wonder. Using story, image, and the labyrinth, the Reverend Dr. Lauren Artress and I will guide you on a journey to open both your spiritual mind's eye and your physical eyes to wisdom, beauty, and meaning. In these turbulent times, we need to feed the soul with beauty and open it to the realm of the imagination. Our creative and mindful time together will give you an opportunity to do just this. The stories we share will stoke the inner world of the imagination, and the photographs you create will open you to the magic and wonder of the world around you. We will engage in the language of metaphor as we explore and reflect through our images, the labyrinth, and story. The word photography means drawing with light. It must have seemed much like magic when the very first photographers discovered that they could suspend moments of time in a fixed image. Much has changed since then. Contemplative photography can be a silent language of the soul, a language of reflection. Making images has been one of my forms of soul-searching, a way to understand myself more fully, to see deeper into what calls to me, and in the process discover meaning in my life. During our time together, One of our practices will be mindfully changing the language we use for photography. We automatically speak of taking a photograph, capturing an image, going to a photo shoot, a headshot, aiming the camera, a point-and-shoot camera, and more. I have often wondered how a word that means drawing with light has become associated with the metaphor of warfare and aggression. I can only guess that perhaps early flash photography encouraged this comparison. Rather than seeing photography as an act of aggression or taking, I like to see it as an act of co-creation. I believe making or creating a photograph is a co-creative act between the photographer and the subject being photographed. I believe that when we start changing our language around photography, it transforms into a meditation and a contemplation of the world around us, instead of a way to capture the world. This change in perspective allows us to see differently. For me, photography is not about technical perfection and control. It is about openness to surprise and mystery. To co-create, one needs to be completely in the present moment. Photography can wake us up to a deeper way of thinking and living, as can mythic stories. Images and words can enrich our lives as they connect us to our senses, to our souls, and to our imagination. During our time together, we will not only explore the land and history of Georgia O'Keeffe, but engage in deep and fresh ways of seeing, both inwards and outwards. Any camera will work for this retreat, and your phone camera, such as an iPhone, is ideal. When you leave Ghost Ranch, you will be more in flow with your creative impulse and refreshed and renewed to meet the world with a new perspective and focus.
It's really wonderful, Catherine. Thank you so much for doing this amazing 5-minute way of being able to take us to Ghost Ranch. You really captured the red earth and the blue sky.
The scenery is just amazing. The scenery, you know, it's overwhelming. My first time there, I couldn't believe the grandeur of the place. Mm-hmm. So different from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Absolutely, for sure. And different here from Walnut Creek in California, for sure. Although I do have a wonderful view of Mount Diablo, so that it's not red earth though, like Ghost Ranch is, for sure. Well, one of the things that Ghost Ranch is known for, by the way, it's 22,000 acres in the middle of New Mexico, right? But north, and near the city of Abiquiu, which is where Georgia O'Keeffe was known to live. But she also had a ranch house in the middle of these 22,000 acres. And so this was her kind of really retreat place to paint these amazing, amazing paintings that I'm sure many of you are aware, at least through photographs. So one of the things we're going to do is, and early on in the week, is there's a tour offered, meaning we'll all get into a bus van, and not a whatever, and travel to different places on the land and take about 4 or 5 of her paintings and line the painting up with where you're standing. So you'll be able to see what she saw, sort of, and we're going to talk about that, Catherine. Is that possible to ever see anything what somebody else has seen? But to really get a sense not only of the land, but of her painting and what she was beholding with her eyes as well. So that's the way we'll launch the week. And then, Catherine, we're in the planning stage, by the way. What I do in the planning stage is I just stay really wide open And for me, I'm want to attract stories toward myself and things that we'll reflect on. Catherine's going to be teaching and working with your cameras. And like you said, Catherine, cell phones are ideal.
In fact, you know, cell phones these days are probably better than cameras that we used 10, 20 years ago, you know, that cost thousands of dollars. So iPhone and Android camera is really easy to use. And I have these really great little attachments that can turn them into macro cameras. So the kind of camera you have really is not, good photographs are not made by a camera. They're made by the person behind the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And also, what is a good photograph? Who determines what a good photograph is? I've always said, if something touches me, then it's good enough. That it is what it is. You don't have to judge it. So photography is about really finding things that speak to you in the land and slowing down enough to actually see them and connect to them.
And you'll be guiding people to do this. It's meditative, it's contemplative as well.
And a lot of very practical exercises where, you know, people are given an invitation to go out and look for certain things in the landscape. Because I consider we have a language of vision. Like our alphabet is a language for writing. There's certain things that are a visual language, pattern and line and shadow and color. Those are all, it's a visual language. And so we have to learn that visual language and start seeing those things. And often photographs that have an impact bring all of those together in the image. So it's going to be playful. It's really going to be playful. It's not a technical photography course. It's about learning to see with your whole body, with all your senses again.
Yes.
And not just with your head, with your mind.
Good. And I'm glad it's not technical. You know, I think it takes it away from the contemplation and the meditative. And the area is so beautiful. You're just drawn in. And so that's the way we'll use our mornings, is really with Catherine's guidance, going out and seeing what speaks to us. And that'll be unique to each person, just like the Labyrinth experiences are. And then in the afternoon, what we're planning to do is we'll be probably inside. It'll be a little warmer during that time. And I am offering a time not only for us to reflect on our experiences with Catherine, but also to tell stories, to use images, metaphors, a way of kind of helping us understand how our imagination works and how that functions, and how to be able to bring that into our everyday life, so we can see the essence and the beauty of what stands before us. I love to think about storytelling is metaphor. It uses the imagination. And metaphoric thinking, said Aristotle, is the highest function of the brain. And I think that's so interesting. He also said the soul never thinks without an image. So always an image brings us in connection to our soul. And so I'm hoping that you can begin to see how this work will weave back and forth as well. Metaphor, I always love, because a lot of people think metaphor is dead. And that in itself is a metaphor, by the way. So Marion Woodman defines metaphor, not only connected in essence to the soul, and I'll bring more of this into our workshop, but I love her one quote, is that a metaphor brings spirit and matter together without bloodshed. And I think that's a wonderful way of describing it. And then when you think about metaphor, you know, she's a peach, he's a prince, all of these kinds of ways that the spirit and matter come together. And I think that's a wonderful way, and that's what stories do. That's what storytelling does. So I'll be weaving in stories. I have no idea which ones, but there'll be quite a catch of ones in terms of depending on who we are in the room and who we are as a group together as well. So Catherine, you talked, and we are planning, and we've outlined the days. Do we want to talk about that, and then we'll talk about the second one we agreed to explore a little bit.
Yeah, so just bear in mind that creative people sometimes change their minds. But this is where we've landed right now is we'll meet there on Monday, May the 6th, and everyone will arrive. We'll have an opening ritual and walk the labyrinth. You saw that beautiful labyrinth in the video. I would say it's one of the most amazing labyrinths I've ever walked because of the surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
It's out there with these red mountains all around it in the middle of nature. It's amazing. So the next day, Tuesday, May the 7th, our theme for the day is living in a relational world. So we're going to talk a lot about seeing without naming and using a fresh language of vision, the power of words, connection, belonging, all sorts of things and stories that go along with that. On Wednesday, May the 8th, our theme is cleansing the doors of perception. And Lauren and I will talk a little bit about that this evening. And then on Thursday, May the 9th, our theme for the day is a world in a grain of sand. And we'll talk about the idea of as above, so below. I'll introduce you to the little macro lens that you'll be able to go use. The last time I taught at Ghost Ranch, one of the ladies went away with one of these macro lenses and said it was the best thing. It's a little piece of elastic with really a magnifying glass on it, but it allowed her to see the world in a completely different way, because we so often pass by things that are really magical and amazing and we don't even see them because we're so used to looking at a certain level and not really seeing the world around us. Mm-hmm. So that will introduce you to that. And then on Friday, May the 10th, which is our last full day together, our theme is walking in wonder and awe. And so we'll talk about walking, wandering, and wondering. And we're going to maybe use our photographs to create a 3-line story. What is the image telling you? What came out of that for you? What is it actually saying to you? So we're playing with all those ideas at the moment. But we thought we might give you a little bit of an insight into what we might talk about on the Wednesday, the 8th, on cleansing the doors of perception.
Mm-hmm. You can hear a lot of William Blake woven into this, a great mystic artist and really incredibly wise figure coming from the Romantic age. So yes, cleansing the eyes of perception, the doors of perception, which of course refer to the eyes as well as something broader as well. But so when Catherine and I were planning this, I was sharing a story that happened at Grace Cathedral that really weaves this together. There's a woman walked in on Sunday morning and she was angry, really angry, just seething with anger. And I kind of inquired and, what's going on? And she's all very angry at her friends, just angry. And she came to the cathedral with the intent to walk the labyrinth and then go home and call them all and kick them out of her life. And I thought, well, that's curious. So let's see what happens during the labyrinth walk. And as she began to walk, there were probably about 3 or 4 other people on the labyrinth. And as she walked it, and this was the days where the tapestry labyrinth was there in Grace Cathedral, if some of you remember that. And she began to walk it, and she found her pace, and she was really moving around, and then she really slowed and began to look and really see things from a different angle. And that's what she realized, that she was seeing things differently than the other people on the labyrinth. And every time she moved, she saw something different because it was a different angle. And after the walk, she came over and said, I get it. I'm angry at my friends because they don't see the world the way I do. And if they don't agree with me 100%, I feel unsupported. I mean, it was a great insight. And that her expectation was people are supposed to see the world the way she does. And that seems to be about cleansing the doors of perception. Don't you think, Catherine?
Yeah, I love that story. I really do. And the camera sees completely differently from the way we do. So when we look through the camera, we think we think it's going to see the world out there the same way we do, but our eyes adjust for light, for instance. So if you're looking outside and there's a lot of shadow, bright light and shadow, our eyes adjust so it looks as though it's similar. Whereas the camera just sees dark shadow and light light.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people have photographed someone and they'll look at the photograph afterwards and notice that half the face is in shadow and half is in light. But they didn't see that when they were photographing. But the camera sees exactly what is out there, whereas we see what our brain has adjusted to see. And often we don't see things that are there because I think somewhere in our primitive brain, we've sort of been wired to see only new things because it's there for our survival. So if something's new and unusual in the environment, we notice it a lot more than if it's something that we pass by every day. And so photography as contemplative practice brings you back into that space where you actually see the things that you've got so used to that you don't see anymore,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is a totally different perspective. And I think also changing the language is seeing it from a different perspective. You know, changing the metaphor from this aggressive metaphor that we've been using for years, which doesn't make any sense. And we carry on using it even though the equipment that we use for photography is so different from years ago when photography was first invented.
Because gunpowder was actually used, wasn't it, at one point?
It was. They used to have these flashes that they held up and they would go off and you would have the smell of gunpowder.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think people were a little nervous about it at the beginning. They didn't quite know what was happening. And so I think these metaphors, ways of describing it, came in those days. But we no longer use gunpowder in our flashes. And so I think it's time to look at it rather than just accept it and accept the language we've used forever, is look at it and say, is it still applicable?
Well, it certainly clearly is not, but to develop a new language would be important as well. And maybe, like you're saying, more contemplative language. I wanted to comment on one thing from your video that might be new to people watching it, is that in the center of the labyrinth, and there's two labyrinths in Ghost Ranch, and I think you showed both of them, the Heart Labyrinth as well. The earlier labyrinth was a gift given by the Bryants, John and Mary Beth Bryant, and early on they got taken in by the labyrinth and loved it and were connected to Ghost Ranch. But in the center of the one that we'll be using mostly, which is under starlit sky, it'll be fantastic. In the stones in the center, people have the tradition here we are, Hispanic and Native American, as well as Anglo culture. People bring gifts to the labyrinth. And so that's why you see stones and you see coins and you see all sorts of collections of things on each stone. And they have 6 stones in the center of the labyrinth, symbolizing the 6 petals. So to me, that popped out at me in your video.
Mm.
And I would imagine that some people would not be used to seeing that. And I remember them consulting me years ago to say, what do we do with all the things that are in the center of the labyrinth? So, but that's something new for people to see. And that newness, I think you're right, that we miss so much if we're just accustomed to seeing through our, uncleansed perception of the eye.
And also we rush. We do live in a rushed world. And so a retreat time like this is time to slow down. And you can stop and look at a piece of grass on the side of the road. You can go out early in the morning when there might be dew on something and see something that you wouldn't ordinarily have time to stop and really sit with and be with. And I find every time I do that, it just wakens the sense of wonder up within me that we live in this unbelievable universe. To me, it can be a mystical experience being out there with a piece of grass. It might sound crazy to some people, but just realizing that this was put there and there's this bit of dew that's just hanging on the top of the piece of grass, it's just magical for me.
And
So,
it's
and I love sharing it and giving people the tools to experience it for themselves, because I think it changes us.
such a magical place to do this workshop in. I'm really looking forward to those magnifiers.
They're really a lot of fun and so easy to use, you know, and that's the thing is, yeah, photography has now become really easy, and yet there's some very simple things you can do with your iPhone that most people don't even know about. And I will, you know, I will touch on those. I'll invite people if they want to learn a little bit about that. In literally 5 minutes, I can show you how you can use your iPhone and make better photographs with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I will have a time which will be optional where people can come and learn this very simple photo app, which they can then enhance photographs with. But it's, you know, it's all invitational when it comes to photography, you know.
For sure. Yeah. Well, that's really wonderful. And to allow people just to kind of, I mean, there's plenty of place to roam and to see, not that you have to go far away to see something brand new, especially in the terrain that we'll be in. So it'll really be wonderful. Well, let's be a little specific. You mentioned about the dates, and that's fine. That's in May. And you fly into Albuquerque Airport. Some people rent a car. Maybe we can kind of help people hook up, whatever, and then drive up to Ghost Ranch. And even that is just an exquisite drive.
Beautiful drive, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll be using the Labyrinth. We'll be using it in the evening as mostly, but also during the day. And maybe that's one of the ways you allow yourself to quiet yourself as you begin to step into a contemplative place in your being as you go to take your photos. So
we go to make our photographs or create photographs.
yes, there's that language. Yeah.
And it's so easy to go back into the language that we're so used to. And to me, it's always a reminder of how we get automated to things, and how becoming conscious requires being really present to what you are saying and what you're doing.
Yes. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you'll be having to help us correct and kind of shift our language and shift our viewpoint.
Yeah. And it's an invitation, you know, it's hard. It's very hard to change things sometimes, but when you become aware of things, aware of one thing, it makes you aware of other things as well.
Yeah, that's very true, because I have a couple of those pet peeves in language, and so we can explore those as well. So, well, Catherine, this conversation will be continued. We want to encourage people to come. This is really kind of a once-in-a-lifetime time to do this and explore how we see the world with wonder. So,
and I think Veritas have an early bird until February 15th.
Yes. So there's an early bird special. Take advantage of it. It's about $100 less expensive, so that's important. And if you do have any other questions and think of them, you can send them to the office, the veritas.org. But think about who you'd like to share this workshop with. I think that's something that's contemplative and gentle and soft, and including the labyrinth and storytelling and image and photography. It's really a unique offering for sure. So about time that we sign off. We are delighted that you have visited our site and that have been with us. And we really encourage you to attend. It will be very special. And Catherine, it's going to be wonderful working with you.
I'm very excited about doing this with you, Lauren.
It'll be fun. It'll really be fun and enriching. And I love the fact that you made the point that we need to slow down and we need to take in our beautiful world. And this is one way to do it, for sure. Yeah. So thank you all for coming and being here, which is a wonderful way to communicate since we live so far away in different places. And so have a lovely evening. And we hope to see you in Ghost Ranch.
Yes, hope to see you at Ghost Ranch with your camera.
Yes, just simply your iPhone. No bigger deal than that, which I think is wonderful. I like that very much. So, all right, good evening, folks. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you.